Stranger Things conclusion finally arrives. Does it land right side up or upside down? Let's find out.
Temporal causality. We think we're stuck in a specific fragment in time, but we've been repeating that same fragment over and over.
I just want a second look.
There's something about this one, isn't there? It's familiar somehow.
Colonel O'Neill is correct. Events do appear to be repeating themselves.
Let me quote Leviticus 10.
We saw this.
Hello, welcome to You've Seen It Before, TV Reviews Connection the Mind. Stranger Things has dropped all of its episodes in its fifth and final season. The much-delayed final season has finally arrived on Netflix and is once again directed by the Duffer Brothers. And we see the town of Hawkins is under military occupation after the events of the previous season, and it's up to our group of adults and let's face it, young adults alike to infiltrate the Upside Down, find and destroy Vecna, and save the world. Now, this video review will contain spoilers of Stranger Things 5. I'll be doing my spoiler-free thoughts first and foremost, though, but just so you know, there will be spoilers later on this review. So, first things first, let's get into some spoiler-free talk on the entirety of Stranger Things Season 5. Was this a good season of Stranger Things? Was this a good conclusion to the entire saga, really? And does it leave fans satisfied or not? I would say, if you've been following Stranger Things from the very beginning, I would say this definitely gives closure to a lot of the lingering things that we've built up over these past 5 years, and it does leave some things open. However, it's been well publicized that Netflix does want to produce some more Stranger Things spin-offs in the future, so there are a couple of things that potentially set things up for the future spin-offs, but for this core group of kids, I would say it gives mostly closure. I can't say so much at the spoiler-free section, but I will say, for the most part, it is satisfying. I will say, they do handle character moments, especially at the end, pretty well. This season may have been a victim of overhype, I think, because the way the marketing definitely set this up, it felt like this would kind of be a, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows type situation where, we've got all these characters, they can't all make it through. Who's going to die in this? It's kind of like that. But, that didn't end up being the case, I think, despite all the hype, that was going on. I mean, there are some character deaths, I will say. But overall, this felt like a relatively straightforward season of Stranger Things, despite the, frankly, dumb release schedule that they decided to do for this season. I'm sure it plays out better all the way through as compared to doing 4, 3, and 1, I think is how they did it. And that's both a positive and a negative, because one of the things that I think a lot of people have probably spoken about when the previous volumes of the season came out was the exposition dumps in this. And it's hard to deny that there is a pattern of, we're going to make a plan, let's talk about the plan goes wrong, and then we regroup again, and all right, let's make a new plan. Like, we're going to talk about the plan goes awry, something, we have to regroup again, and so on and so on and so on, That happens a lot in this season, and while I do appreciate the callback to my personal favorite movie, The Great Escape, in one such episode, it's hard to ignore that kind of exhibition. And I think I noticed in this season in particular, maybe part of the reason that they ended up doing it that way is, if you watch previous seasons of Stranger Things, they don't do this because they have those big, previously on Stranger Things at the very beginning. And if you're just binge watching them throughout, then you get that for the first one where maybe you left off for the night or whatever, and then you have the option to skip recap going forward, and then the rest of the episode feels like it doesn't have to have that kind of exposition in order to keep you invested. Here, it seemed like that happened pretty much every 5 minutes or so, where you're referencing either something that happened in season 1, season 2, or sometimes something that happened like maybe half an hour earlier in the very episode you're watching. And it got really annoying after a while. And I think part of the reason is it felt like this season, and maybe this is Netflix, doing their thing. It felt like this season was intended to be watched by people who aren't fully watching it, where you're half watching it on your phone and you're like, oh wait, what happened just here? It's like, oh, this is what's going on. Okay. It's like, and as a viewer, I think that's somewhat insulting, and I can't really justify them doing it like that. I mean, if you did the recaps in front of each episode, or even if you're doing them in the blocks or whatever, have one big one at, the beginning of season 1, or episode 1 rather, beginning of episode 5, I guess is where they're on, and then right before the finale. The only reason I remembered where all the characters were going into the finale is because, Christmas and New Year's were relatively close together. I would have appreciated a bit of a recap going into that second block, because it was almost a month between the end of episode 4 and the debut of episode 5 on that. So we didn't get that. So what the heck, So those are primarily release strategy gripes. The season overall, I would say, aside from those exposition dumps, I think they did the characters well enough. I think, again, this is not a new complaint with Stranger Things, is that at a certain point they got to too many characters and some get left behind or not utilized nearly enough. Like, we finally get to learn more about what happened to Max from the end of season 4. It's like, she comes back in this, like, well, I wish she'd done more with her. And we also get a new military officer in the form of Dr. K, who is played by 80s screen legend Linda Hamilton. And we don't really get to do much with her either. It's like, why are you bringing a big name? You're bringing a big name just because, she was big in the 80s, and that's kind of the Stranger Things shtick. And, you don't do much with her. So what was that about? And, you have the various character dilemmas, Mike and Elle, Will and his family, Joyce and Hopper, you got those kind of dynamics going on, and they do a lot of emphasis on that. But I think the extraneous characters do get the shaft a little bit. They don't get nearly enough screen time as much as they should, and that's just the consequence of having too many characters in your story. And a lot of movies and shows that have too many characters in it suffer the same thing. So that's a shortcoming on that. However, all that being said, I would say if you were a fan of Stranger Things from the very, very beginning, I personally kind of jumped on board in season 2. I caught up after season 1 just because everyone was so hyping up about this new show Stranger Things. So I'm not from the very beginning, but as someone who's kept up with the show since at least season 2 onward, I would say this is satisfying enough. But I do have problems with how things ended, and that's where we're going to get into spoiler territory. But before we get into spoilers, I would say if I was going to give Stranger Things 5 a letter grade, I would say this is an A-. Like I said, those nitpicky things do tend to hurt it a little bit, but overall, the positives outweigh the negatives on that front. And also, if I was going to weigh this season in on the scale of unoriginality, I would say this weighs in at original enough. It's a passing grade, but nothing to be overly proud of. So those are my spoiler-free thoughts on Stranger Things 5. Now let's get into some spoiler talk as to certain plot developments and character arcs that may seem familiar to you and where you may have seen them before. So I kind of already alluded to it in the spoiler-free section where I said it felt like going in this was going to be a Battle of Hogwarts type situation where, who's going to die. And we don't necessarily get that, but what we do get is introducing new or rather old characters that we've seen before. We just haven't thought about them in probably a decade at this point. And I'm speaking of the character of Kali, who is from season 2, the one episode 9, I think it was, where Elle takes her side mission to Chicago, I guess, and meets the other psychic kids who escaped. And that was pretty universally declared by the Stranger Things fandom as the worst episode of the show ever. And we hadn't thought about it for season 3, season 4, and then all of a sudden she's back. And it's like, okay, what do that's a big swing. What are you going to do with this? And while I think her sacrifice, I'm not entirely sold on her sacrifice just because it plays it up as a big moment. I mean, character-wise, it makes sense how the narrative goes, but I think as it, impacting on the audience member, it's like, we haven't cared about this character in 3 seasons, and now, I'm supposed to feel, humongous emotions that, she got shot, and it's like, I don't think it hit nearly as much as the Duffers probably would like it to have hit. And this made me think of, the latest Mission Impossible film, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, where, that's another culmination of a long franchise of movies, and they're trying to bring in different threads, to tie everything together. And in that movie, the big one was the Rabbit's Foot from Mission Impossible 3, where they're bringing it back in. And up until that point, that was just one of those MacGuffins that is like, well, what is it? We have no idea what this is. And yet now we're bringing it back to the forefront in order to add more importance to it, retcon its importance and its to the overall timeline, because that was nowhere near the intention when they first made Mission Impossible 3. But you're trying to bring it back into relevance and draw people into a less popular installment of the franchise, I'll say. Not that it's bad, but it's, I think some of the later Mission Impossibles are better in that perspective. So that was one point of comparison to be made here. Another one is the way they talk about plugging into there's the virtual reality aspect of Vecna's plan, where he's kidnapped all these kids and they're living in a dream world within his mind or whatever. And the way, we're going to jack into the hive mind. We're going to, plug into the hive mind. It's, they're seeing things that aren't real, and you got to see the truth for it. As a couple of things. One, the way they're describing it feels like the Borg from Star Trek as a whole, Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, etc. But also you could point to the Matrix as well, especially when you lose the mind connection and they just poof out of the virtual reality thing. They all just die, obviously, like the Matrix. But the way they described it, it felt very much like, we gotta, break into this virtual reality and show them that what they're seeing isn't real, who they think is real isn't, and you got all that going with for you. So that was another point of comparison. Speaking of Vecna, just a brief point of comparison. In the finale, where we see how he's able to play mind games with Hopper and trick him into, shooting the tank, and thinking that he's killed Elle, but he hasn't, showing his worst fears, diving and into his guilt. Made me think of Scarlet Witch, specifically in Avengers: Age of Ultron, and how she used her powers against the Avengers in that way. And finally, the big twist at the end. What do you call it? A twist, a reveal, whatever. I suspected going into this that the Duffers would not have the strength to completely kill off 11. And for a second there, the way they portray it, she seemingly sacrifices herself once she destroys the Upside Down and stays with it as it collapses in the portal. And you have a big long ending, seeing how people are moving on with their lives afterwards, and it's like, oh, well, maybe they did kill her off. But nope, we have the Will's what if scenario, which, they have the out where it's like, oh, he's just speculating. We have no idea if that's true, but let's be honest with ourselves. This was completely written as an out to say, oh, well, if the spinoffs need a extra surprise cameo from Millie Bobby Brown in the future, we have that way to write her in. And it's like that screamed of contract negotiation on Netflix's part to me. But as a way of narrative saying like, oh, did the main character who did the big sacrifice, did they really die? It just made me think of, this has been done in a lot of things. You can point to like the Iron Giant where everyone thinks he's dead, but then that one's definitively, is shown that he's actually alive. The other example that I kind of thought of was Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows, where, Sherlock takes Moriarty over the side of the cliff, down the waterfall. Everyone thinks he's dead, and then he gets Watson gets the rebreather as like, oh, did he actually survive? And then of course we see Holmes in his room or whatever with the camouflage. So it's like, oh yeah, the big sacrifice that everyone made. It's like, nope, they're still alive. So that was one where I think Netflix that does put a ding on this finale, just because it's satisfying enough. I'm content to leave it as it is, but if they end up bringing her back in some sort of spinoff as a cameo role, it's like, that's just going to make this even worse, and then they're going to, you're going to have to tell them they're coming back. And it's like, that seemed like an unforced error. They could have stuck to their guns and actually killed her off, but it's ambiguous. You could say it's ambiguous that she actually is dead, but let's be honest, that's probably not the case. So those are my main points of comparison on Stranger Things 5. What did you think of this final season? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about my analysis? Do you agree, disagree? Did I miss something? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. I hope you guys had a great 2025 New Year's Eve heading into the new year here, and that you partied responsibly and all that. And if you want to learn more about what you can expect going into the new year, you can check out my best and worst of 2025, which also includes a preview of what to expect from the channel going into this new year. And as well as you can always check out, I'm doing a film anniversaries video where I point out a bunch of films that have milestone anniversaries coming up this year, the 5-year, the 10-year, 20-year, etc. So that should be a fun one. Look out for that. And if you like this video or any other video on my channel, please give me a like, share, and especially a subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. But just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, you have seen it before.